Sauru bwyd na nyon yn igleia Hagam mar hen am sauruling Awal y gobalis gan yr malyn na yesyn Hagam mar hen am sauruling Babag na baltan na margin na tauri Ska grod gay she's got gone Kalani mashaban yaglegal Katogmar hen on sauruling Sauruin and yon and iglegal Hogmar hen on sauruling Awala gobalis gan yr malyn
Ar Solomon O'Neill, but why I'm faulty of her road.
Thank you.
Tymud yn new yn marn pat Cenwalaharge, embarrassed to matter of the goal, of the Savalio Faring, Ballion the Brigid. So today, on behalf of everyone here, I would like to welcome you, Una. This is quite a historical place as well, as I'm sure you know. We're here in the barony of Cenwalaharge. We're in the parish of Mahardroe. And in the townland of Rogers here, following Blue. We are excited to hear from you. O'Harricha and villages of this Bealtaine, a Hannig and Uis. And you, Tasha Ain't special to doing Lebed Eshtagla. Guramaya.
Thank you. Thank you. So, for inviting me to come down, anyone that stands up and tells me the townland they're living in, I'm won over. Townlands are the most important part of our history. That somebody in 1972 sat in an office with a red pen and put a stroke through 800 years of a heritage in the removing of our townland name. So townland's massively important. Don't exist anywhere else, only in Ireland. There are 62,205 townlands across the island of Ireland. And you know, those names repeated, they carry with them the mythology of Ireland, the geographic features of the area that they're in, and importantly, when we're looking at Celtic folklore and legends, they carry those to the place names. So anywhere that you have Liss or Rath in your townland name, there has been a Celtic fort. So that's the importance of those townland names, and that's what we were in danger of losing when you started to take those away. So everyone can hear me okay? Yeah. And everyone can see. So in terms of setting a scene, you had the formation of the geographic world. We talked the last day about the formation of the Mournes, the Coolies and Gullion 59 million years ago. And Ireland then started to have habitation about 6,000 years ago, New Stone Age men into Bronze Age, and then came the warriors. Then came the Celtic people, the tall, muscular, blue-eyed, fair-haired, warlike pagans from mainland Europe. And the latest DNA is showing that a lot of that population that came here came from Galicia in northern Spain. That's where the DNA is pointing us back towards. And interestingly, we had in the primary school in Mullaban about 8 years ago, we had a girl, an exchange teacher, came for 6 months, and she came from Galicia in Spain. Now my eldest son lives in Spain, but he lives in Catalonia, so he's right down on the southern part. I knew absolutely nothing about Galicia. She was a late student to teaching. She had been a journalist and went back to train as a teacher, and she wanted to do something more than just the school. She was interested in the whole community thing, and she came to talk to me at the hall. And we picked one of Michael J. Murphy's short stories Michael J. Murphy was a folklore collector from Drummondtee. He was an author, he was a poet, he was a broadcaster, he was a playwright, but he collected folklore from right across from Rathlin Island down to the Boyne and over to Leitrim and Sligo. His folklore collection is in the National Museum Folklore Collection in Dublin. It's the largest in the English-speaking world. So he was a master collector and storyteller. But he had written a beautiful short story that was called The Emigrant. And it was partly biographical, but it was about a girl leaving the side of Slieveguillion, and she went to America. She made good money in vaudeville in New York, which would have been seen as slightly risky and not maybe the profession that she should have been in. She left New York and came home to nurse her ailing father in Drummondtee on the side of the mountain, and found that she didn't fit in there. She'd never properly fitted in America, but when she came home, she didn't fit in there. She was between two worlds. It's just a lovely short story. We recorded half of it in South Armagh Voices. We filmed around South Armagh. She went home for Christmas and she recorded the last part of the story in her native tongue, and she filmed in Galicia. And when we put the two together to make a complete article, the night that it was played in the hall in Mullaban, people behind me were saying, "Oh, that's from the top of Cashel." And she was saying, "No, that's out behind my house in Galicia." You couldn't have told between the landscape of the two areas. And the contrast and the things that were communal, they had lost their language. Galicia is looked down as a poor area of Spain. It's looked down on central government as a poor outlawed type area. They had lost their language. They had suffered greatly with emigration, as had where we were in South Armagh and the rest of Ireland. So the commonality. But latest DNA is talking about Galicia. So these were the Celtic people, the people that became known as the Celts. And this is the type of house that they lived in. This is a Celtic Round House. Now, this is a newly created. We have a Celtic Round House in Mullaban. Newly built, exact replica of what a Celtic house would have looked like. So you have your round shape, you have the roof that's pitched up, and your smoke going out through your top roof. Your walls are done with wattle and daub. So if I just show you, now this is your inside walls. This is willow, weaving in and out through each other to form a round shape that's going to be wattled over. This is your roof spacing gone up. These are ash trees. Taken together at the top and tied and lashed with rope. So that's forming the shaping of your roof. You'll see that I'm a better talker than I am a filmer. My daughter looked at it and she said, "Please, Mommy, don't show that to anybody." So this is your outside of where the willow is inside, made with mud, just tramped mud and water, and it's daubed onto it. It's called wattle and daub, and that's your roof space and your thatching on the outside of it. So a complete replica round house. It's at Bluebell Lane in Mullaban, and it's open for people to go and see it and to see what a Celtic round house would have looked like. So it all starts from here. This is the hill of Uisneach, and the hill of Uisneach is in the barony of Rathconrath in Westmeath. It's almost geographically the centre of Ireland, and where we associate Tara and the hill of Tara as the seat of the High Kings of Ireland, this was the spiritual centre of the Celtic people. At this festival of Bealtaine, which was the half year of light, all fires across Ireland were extinguished, and the bonfire was lit on the top of the hill of Uisneach, and fires then lit back out across Ireland from here. But this is the sacred centre of Ireland in pagan times. So the Celts were coming here roughly 4000 BC. 400 BC. I was telling one of the women here that I was in St Mary's yesterday in Newry with first year girls, 11, 12-year-olds. And I said to them when I went in, I love history, and you could see the blank faces of them looking at me thinking, ooh, history. And then I said, and you know, my growing up is your history. And they looked at me again, and I said, because we had no electricity, no running water, no inside toilet, no mobile phone, no computer. And you could see them looking at each other thinking, what age is she? You know, but that's the changing of the world. So if you think that the Celtic people, or the people that we took the name of Celts, of calling them the Celts, because they didn't call themselves the Celts. If you think that they came in 400 BC and that they really lost their power with Christianity coming, and we'll talk about the movement into Christianity, that we still have the core of what we do in many ways, with language, with music, with all of those things, we can still take it back to the Celtic people. And all of the other people that came into Ireland since, none of them have left the legacy that we take with us from the Celtic people. So anyone who's up by Westmeath, it's worth calling to the Hill of Uisneach. This is the Celtic Year. The Celtic Year was divided firstly in the half year of light and the half year of darkness. So the half year of light was the festival of Bealtaine, and the half year of darkness was the festival of Samhain. The 2 quarter years, so the 4 quarter years are Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lúnasa and Samhain. The 1st of February, the 1st of May, the 1st of August and the 1st of November. And the one that we're nearest to, because it's just next week, is the festival of Imbolc. And the 1st of February we associate as the patron day of St Brigid, because Brigid's feast is on the 1st of February. But Brigid, before she was a Christian saint, Brigid was a pagan goddess. And she was the pagan goddess of Imbolc, the quarter year of Imbolc, the opening of spring, the new birth, the lambing season, all of the things that went with the spring season and Imbolc. Brigid was the pagan goddess of those. And this is where the story takes the assimilation of what happens when one civilization is on the decline and a new type of movement of civilization is coming in. So 400 BC, and Patrick came to Ireland, we were told, in 400 AD. So in the span of those 800 years, Érenwacha, or the headquarters in Ulster of the Celts outside Armagh city, was at its height of prominence in 100 AD and then started to decline as Christianity came in. So if you're a new movement of people with a new story to tell when you come to somewhere, the easiest way of doing that and bringing people along with you is to use things that people are already familiar with and to build new stories around them. So Brigid, as the pagan goddess and the opening of spring, became Saint Brigid and carried a similar story with her, other than the piece around fertility, because she was the pagan goddess of fertility, and the Christian church didn't put as good an emphasis on the fertility bit of it that was part of the pagan goddess as they did around the other part of it. But her feast day stayed on the 1st of February, on the opening of the quarter year of Imbolc. So Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lúnasa and Samhain, and a lot of the traditions that we carry on even to present day. Even the 11-year-olds yesterday in St Mary's admitted that they'd heard about some of them. So we still do some of the things that were part of these Celtic times. This is Faughart. Now, we didn't get to Faughart the day that we went round South Armagh. Faughart is just inside County Louth. It's on the routeway of the Gap of the North. So it was the travelling route that was coming from Tara on that road that was known as the Slimalukra, which ran right from Tara to Dunseverick in County Antrim. It's the routeway that William came on his way to fight in the Battle of the Boyne. The other road that was going through South Armagh, the Ballymorna Fada, the Great Road of the Fuse, was the routeway that James's army came on. But they both came through the borderland of South Armagh to go as far as the Boyne. So Faughart, coming from the Irish, means battle, the fields of battle. So this area of Faughart not only carries the story of Brigid, but it carries the story of Cuchulainn. So we're going to look at both of them. But this is Brigid's well. This is the old well that's in the old graveyard of Faughart. When you go to Faughart, there's the old graveyard site, and there's a new site that's further down, that's around Brigid's stream, that is a much more modern, only set up in the 50s. But when we went as children, it's to the old Brigid's well that we went. So the steps down into you can see the side of the well, you can see that the top of it is almost like the beehive huts that would have been part of the monastic buildings in earlier times. And these holy wells that are now holy wells, these were pagan wells, because the pagan people worshipped nature. They worshipped the trees, they worshipped the rivers, they worshipped the mountains, the water. Wherever water flowed, they had a sense that there was a healing power where water flowed. So there are many stories coming from the old Celtic tradition of people going to where the water flowed. If the person who was sick couldn't go, then they took something belonging to them, they dipped it in the water, they left half of it behind at the well, and they took the other half home to the person who was sick. And that continues right to the present day here, because this is the bush at the side of the old well in Faughart. And if you go to Menina's well in Killeavy, it's exactly the same. It's part of the tradition that goes with what we now call holy wells, but coming completely through from the tradition of what the Celtic people would have done and what they would have worshipped in terms of nature and of water.
Sauru buina nyona nigleya Hakamar henum sauruling Awala kabalis kaner malina yeshin Hakamar henum sauruling Papagna baltan margina tauri Ska krokkai shi ska tam Kalani mashaban yaglegal Kasogmar henan sauruling Saurubuin and yonan igleya Hagamar henan sauruling Awala kabalis kanermalan na yeshin Hagamar Gus Gulukis Blarna Grim Tam Hurkis na Henley Shanum the pleasure Cause Hogamar Hen on Sauruling Saurubuin and Yon and Igleya Hogamar Hen on Sauruling Awalako Balis Father Malin Yeshin Hogamar Hen Tanya digin yeri herana halyas nya digin kharish kar yega unkhrin Tameler na kashaks na kalam na beku kas hogamar hen on sauruling saoróling. Tan griennig lin rusa lasúna dortas, tan arga mar scanne gairi tan grin. Tan amadi a perus an chalach a gerni, gus hagam mar hedin an saoróling. Saoróbuin an yon an eagle reya, hagam mar hedin an saoróling. Awal go balas van er maden a yeshin, hagam mar hedin an saoróling. Saoróbuin an yon an eagle reya, hagam mar hedin an saoróling. Awal go balas van er maden a yeshin, hagam mar hedin an saoróling.
Was the opening of the half year of light, and that welcomed in the movement of animals and of people, because what happened, and that song is dedicated to Babag na Bealtaine, the Dáil of Bealtaine. What happened at Bealtaine was people moved cattle to the high pastures, to move them up to the mountain so that the land around their own houses could be used to grow crops. Now, we have almost totally written our women out of our histories. Women are not visible, unless for a certain amount of women. But the people who took the cattle up and were at the Booley sites, and I'm sure you've heard people talking about the Booley and the Booley sites on the side of the mountain, the people who took the cattle up were mostly the women. And that story is a completely untold story. Now, some of that song is a tribute to it. That song was saved by an old man in County Monaghan and has been newly recorded. Seamus Heaney, in 2004, at the opening or the extending of the European Union, wrote a poem that he did in Phoenix Park at that celebration event, and it was called Beacons of Bealtaine, if you want to look it up. And again, he talks about the Celtic coming back and the festival of Bealtaine. But this is one of the things that would have happened at the Bealtaine festival was the May bush. And the putting of the yellow flowers along the windowsills of the house, and not only of the house but of the byre where the animals were. And that story moved into a modern time because when I asked the children yesterday what did they do at primary school during the month of May, they said they put up an altar to Our Lady. And that's where you're taking your story from, of the protection of people and animals and of the worshipping of something during the opening of the Festival of May, and again has moved into a different format in a different tradition. So we do the May bush every year. This is at the site of Mullaban Hall, and these are the primary 5 children from Mullaban School. So we still decorate a May bush. Now, it used to be a piece of a hawthorn was cut and decorated, and it was carried around the houses or carried through the main streets of villages or towns, but we don't take it to cutting anything down. So we decorate the bush and we leave it up for the month of May. We're the only primary school I know in the South Armagh area that's still doing it, but it's lovely to keep a tradition going and that the children know where that's coming from. So if we're talking about myths and legends and talking about the Celtic people, I suppose the biggest hero that we talk about is Cuchulainn. And I can say here that the story of Cuchulainn, even though I'm here in Ballynahinch, is one that we're going to claim in South Armagh, because first of all, it straddles not only Armagh, but it straddles County Louth, because Cuchulainn was born Satanta. He was the king of the Celts at Úna, and Úna itself is what they now call Navan's Fort. So if you go to Navan Fort, you're in the area that's Úna. But that in itself is one of the Celtic legends, because Macha was a pagan goddess, and Macha, as a fairy woman, had married a mortal man. She'd married Crinnog, and he noticed they had a very happy marriage, but he noticed that she was not like other women. She was very fleet of foot. She was extremely quick in all her movements. And all of those things were things that he was noting as he went down. But he had been invited to a feast at Conor MacNess's headquarters, and she warned him before he left, because he was going to be with other Celtic leaders, that he wasn't to speak about her, that he wasn't to talk about any of the differences he noticed in her. And when they started to boast about their women folk, he was to stay quiet. And she had warned him about that before he left, and he did that for a good part of the night, until the boasting of other men got the better of him and he couldn't keep his mouth closed, and he started to boast about his wife and how quick she was on her feet, and she could beat any horse that he owned in a race. And Conor MacNessa was extremely proud of his horses, and he put out a wager that she couldn't beat his best horses. And because he had put himself up and taken this on, he didn't want to withdraw from it. And they arrived to her house. She was heavily pregnant with twins, and she said she couldn't race. And she asked them to leave it, that she couldn't race in the position that she was in. And Conor MacNessa wouldn't back down. And because he was the leader, he told her husband that he had to go ahead with the wager that he had made. He raced against her with his finest horses. He put his own charioteer out, and he drove the horses himself. And she, as she was pregnant, heavily pregnant with twins, she won the race. But as she crossed the line, she fell in birth pangs. Her twins were born dead, and she put a curse on the men of Ulster, that when they were in a position that they needed to attack or to defend themselves, that they would suffer the pangs of childbirth and be unable to move for 3 days. So that's why that area is Úna, the twins of Macha. And Macha as well given its name to Armagh. But that's one of the Celtic legends that goes with the story of Úna. So Conor MacNessa was the king of the Celtic people. His headquarters was Úna. Setanta, child born in Dundalk, on the plains of Merhevna in Dundalk. Setanta's mother was Dactra, sister of Conor MacNessa, and his father was the sun god Lugh. So he was half man, half spirit. If you go to the Crown Plaza Hotel in Dundalk, I'm sure maybe if you've seen pieces in the paper recently, they have a new 50-foot high mural painted on the side of the Crown Plaza in Dundalk, and it is the sun god Lugh. That's where the name County Louth comes from. Lugh is God, is the sun god. Louth is the sun god Lugh, and the motto of the town of Dundalk is, "We are the birthplace of Cuchulainn." So Setanta, born on the plains of Merhevna, wanted to go to Armagh to train to be a Red Branch Knight, and eventually as a 10-year-old boy, his mother allowed him to go to his uncle in Armagh. So they had left one of the two most important people in the Celtic tradition were the blacksmith and the poet. The blacksmith, because the Celtic people were the bringers of iron. That's what they brought with them, the skill of being able to work with iron. So the blacksmith, very important, because he then could shape iron, he could make weapons, he could make farming implements. We still have farming implements that come from that tradition. So he was one of the most important people. Cuchulainn, the blacksmith, lived on the slopes of Slievegullin. So leaving Úna was Conor MacNessa and his group of men, going to pay a visit to Slíomh to have a feast with Cuchulainn and to give him his proper respect as the blacksmith to the Celtic people. And Setanta, as a young boy, had lagged behind, carrying with him a hurl and a ball, and playing with it as he went along. And by the time he came to Slíomh Cuchulainn had thought everybody was in. He had closed the gates, and there were 2 hounds guarding the gate. And when the boy came to the gate, the dogs were ferocious and he couldn't get in. And he hit the ball with the hurl and choked the hound as it opened his mouth. And Cuchulainn was very angry because now he had nobody to guard his forge. And Setanta said until a new hound was trained, he would guard the forge. So Setanta, on the slopes of Slíomh changed his name from Setanta to Cuchulainn, the Hound of Cuchulainn, and guarded the forge. And then went on to be one of the most famous warriors that there is in that Celtic tradition. This Cuchulainn, if you go to the GPO in Dublin, this is the statue that you'll see of him. This is him in his death stance. So, seeing that right through that whole warrior stage, this is Lady Gregory's book, Cuchulainn of Mahevna, first published in 1902. This is another woman, almost completely lost in our history, apart from the fact that everybody knows her because W.B. Yeats and Sean O'Casey stayed with her in Cool Park in Galway. Lady Gregory was the author of over 40 books. She translated most of the folklore of that whole period into the English language. She was a remarkable woman. She was the founder of the Abbey Theatre in Dublin and supported it with her own money for many years, and supported all of those other men that went on to become famous men, and we have nothing of Lady Gregory. My daddy worked with McCartan and McAteer. Now, we're going back a long time. And he was at the waterworks, the building of the first waterworks at Castor Bay, and he used to go into Belfast, and we waited every Friday evening. They stayed away, imagine, no transport. So they stayed in caravans at Castor Bay, even though we were only up in South Armagh. And we waited on a Friday evening to see what he brought home, because he would have trawled the bookshops in Belfast and anywhere that there was clearing of houses. So this is one of the books that was part of my growing up, Cuchulainn of Mahevna by Lady Gregory. Cuchulainn fought his last battle. His most famous story, I suppose, is the Brown Bull of Cooley that we would have heard about, the Táin. So Queen Maeve was Queen of Connacht. Isn't it funny that when there is a story about women, she's always on the wrong side? She's always the wrong one. So Queen Maeve was Queen of Connacht, and she had a white bull. And she claimed the white bull was the best bull in Ireland until she heard about the Brown Bull of Cooley being a better one, and she set out on her route way through Roscommon and heading for Cooley to bring back the Brown Bull of Cooley. And Cuchulainn was the man who was defending the Brown Bull of Cooley to not allow it to be taken. His last battle was with his half-brother, his blood brother as he referred to him, Ferdia, and he killed him, and Ferdia both killed themselves with mortal wounds. Ferdia died first, and if you go to RD, excuse me, in County Louth, there's a statue of Cuchulainn carrying Ferdia in his arms as he died. And then when Ferdia had died, he made his way to the Clough-Faramore, to the big stone at Knockbridge. And Knockbridge is about 4 miles inside County Louth. And if you break it down from the Irish, clock in Irish is stone, far is man, more is big. So he took himself to the Clough-Faramore, to the Bronze Age stone that was in that field. As a warrior of the Red Branch Knights, he couldn't die lying down. So he took his girdle from his waist and he tied himself to the stone, and he awaited his death. And as he died, he gave a sigh, and the stone behind him cracked, and the crack is still in the stone. And because his father was the god Lugh, the Sidhe, the fairy women, came to take the soul of one of their own people. And as the Sidhe carried his soul back to Úna and carried his story into the traditions that were going to come in front of him. This is in the GPO, as I said. This is because of his reputation as a warrior. He stood for 3 days. He hung for 3 days before anybody would venture near him in case he wasn't dead. And it was only when the Morrigan, and the Morrigan is one of the, again, the women of the Sidhe, Morrigan and Macha, sisters. And the Morrigan, in times of battle, she was a war goddess. In times of battle, she turned herself into a raven. And when she came on the 3rd day in the shape of a raven and landed on his shoulder, the others knew that he had died. So this is the statue that you'll see in the GPO. This was done by Oliver Shepherd. It's cast in bronze. Now, the GPO is an iconic building, I suppose, in the story of Ireland, because it's where it will be seen as the opening of the 1916 rebellion. This statue wasn't. it was cast in bronze, and it was taken by De Valera for the 50th celebration of the 1916 rebellion in 1966. But it actually had been made much earlier, and it was made at the time of the Celtic Revival, which would have been led by the like of Lady Gregory and W.B. Yeats. And it was De Valera that put that context on it as being part of the 1916 commemoration, but that's not why it was originally cast. So it sits in an iconic building in Dublin that is part of the 1916 story. But if you went to the Newtownards Road until certainly into the early 200s, you would have seen a wall mural on the side of one of the houses on the Newtownards Road, which would be a very loyalist area of Belfast, where they claimed him as the first defender of Ulster, which he was, because he stood on the borderland of Faughart and South Armagh, and he repelled the forces coming from Connaught. So there's him coming down in two modern interpretations, one in a loyalist area and one by De Valera, claiming him as the person who spearheaded the 1916 rebellion. Both stories being carried through. Now, this is the top of Slieveguillion. This is the lake at the top of the mountain, and this is another legend of Fionn MacCumhaill. They talked to me yesterday that they had the children that they'd been at the Clockmore Stone in Rostrevor, and that Fionn MacCumhaill and the Scottish giants had thrown the stones across at each other, and that's where the Clockmore Stone came from. It was a glacial erratic carried by the ice. But it's fine that Fionn MacCumhaill threw the stone. So I told them then about the Scottish giant had come to Slieveguillion, looking to see what Fionn looked like to have a fight. And Fionn was afraid because he'd heard a lot of stories about the Scottish giant and how strong and how big he was. And he said to his wife, I don't know what we're going to do about this now, because I could be in trouble here. So they came up with a plan, and they made a big cradle. And Fionn dressed as a baby, and she put him into the cradle, and the Scottish giant arrived and knocked on the door, and he said he wanted to see Fionn, and she said she was very sorry her husband was away for that day, but if he wanted to come in and wait, that was fine. So she took him in. Now, we had great fun with this yesterday. She took him in, and she said she was sorry that Fionn was away, and if he wanted to sit down, but she needed to feed the baby. And the baby couldn't wait, and he took one look at the size of the baby in the cradle, and he thought, well, if that's the size of the baby, I'm not waiting for the daddy. And that's how Fionn MacCumhaill repelled the Scottish giant. Look, it's about engaging. It's about whatever your audience is. It's about bringing them into the story, and they'll make different interpretations as they go on, but it's about getting information out. But Fionn MacCumhaill at the top of the mountain, Fionn MacCumhaill, the leader of the Féine, had come from the coulees over onto Slievegullin hunting deer, and when he came to the lake here at the top of the mountain, sitting beside the lake was a beautiful maiden, and she was crying. And he got down from the horse, and she told him that she'd lost her ring in the waters of the lake. And being the gentleman that he was, he went down into the water. A young, handsome, vibrant, golden-haired warrior went into the lake to look for the ring, and went around through the lake and couldn't find the ring, and came back to the surface to find that he was an old, withered man with white hair, and there was no sign of the beautiful maiden. And he pulled himself from the lake, and he lay alongside it, and the Féine men had come looking for their leader and didn't recognise the old man. But the dogs, the hounds that were with him, knew their master by his smell, and he told them what had happened, and they searched the mountain until they found the Callabera, the old hag of the mountain, because that's who the golden young woman was. She had tricked him into believing she was a young girl, and she reversed the spell, and he became again the handsome, vibrant warrior, but retained the white hair. So the moral of the story is, any man who bathes in the waters in the lake at the top of Slievegullin comes out with white hair. Marie and Philomena will know we would have been told as children that there was no bottom. This was to keep us out of it, that there was no bottom in it, and if you went into it you came up in Camla Lake. I can remember being told that as a child. It's very shallow. We had children from Catalan. My son brings home children from Barcelona every year, and they swam across it the last time they were here. But it's one again of this. These are the stories of the Ulster cycle. Now, this is an oral history, because at the time we're talking about, there was no literacy. The story started to become written stories at the time, 7th, 8th century, mostly written by monks. So a lot of what would have been maybe sexual content, or content that was anyway on a wee bit of the dodgy side, tended not to be written down. But it was carried in that oral tradition. Now, I talked about Brigid's Well. I grew up with a group of women in South Armagh who ran South Armagh. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that I was privileged to grow up in an area that was full of strong women. They moved into houses, they birthed babies, they were there when somebody died, they were there when there was trouble, they moved in quietly, they sorted things out, and they moved out every bit as quietly. The one thing they didn't do was they didn't have any conversation of a sexual nature in front of young girls, or even other women who weren't married women. That was very much a closed shop. But I can remember old women saying to a couple who were married and had no family, go up to Faughart. And I thought at that time, when I hadn't a greater understanding of the Celtic stuff, I thought at that time that was purely St. Brigid. I realised afterwards that the church may have cut the fertility bit out, but the oral tradition of the people carried the fertility bit on. And that's why people were told, go to Faughart. Right back to the old pagan goddess of fertility. That was still in the minds of the people and what they used. And they took the bits they wanted and they went with them. So this is, and apart from being the story of Fionn MacCumhaill, it's beautiful to go up to the lake at the top of Slievegullin. So folklore. This is a piece. This is a piece by Michael J. Murphy, and I'm going to read it because it's written in the South Armagh dialect, if you like. Speech pattern is really important. Because up until recent years, if you went for a job in, we'll say, the BBC or any type of broadcasting or any of those organisations, you were expected to speak in a certain way. you were expected to have a modicum or a measure in your speech that wasn't what you were born with and wasn't what you had carried with you from you started to speak. Now that to me is an insidious thing in people because who you are and what created you and what you brought with you is the core part of who you are. And to have to change that to suit somebody else is not a good way to do it. So thankfully dialects now have become a very important part. Ted Hughes, who was Poet Laureate, Ted Hughes was born in the Celtic kingdom of Elmet in West Yorkshire. He said that it was looked down upon by the rest of England as an area of badlands and outlaws. It was a Celtic kingdom in that region. But that he carried with him his dialect and his sense of being. And if he had not had that, he doubted he would ever have written poetry. That's from a poet laureate. That's in part of his writings. So this is a piece of folklore. And do you know how ducks come to swim? You don't. Well, that's a Tara, and you're a scholar. Now, that would have been said to me, that would have been said to us as children when an old person was trying to let you know that you didn't know everything. And you, a scholar, going to school and you don't know that. So, when our Lord was on earth, he was hiding one day from his enemies under a pile of flax shoughs. And in a wastrel of a hen, there never were a hen in South Armagh, there were a hen, came up and started to tear with her feet. Bad scran to the same hens and their tearing. She stripped the shows off them indeed. And then the ducks come up then and them started to cackling like mad. And they flew at the hen and they scared her off. And they covered him again with their beaks and they sat on him, cackling away. The soldiers came and saw the cackling ducks and passed it by. The ducks couldn't swim then, you know. But doesn't a big flood come over the country? And he gave the ducks the right to swim. The hens were drowned, but the ducks were saved. And that's why ducks can swim now. That's a piece of Michael J. Murphy's collection, in his folklore collection. And I'm not joking you. If I close my eyes, I can see that conversation happening in houses where I grew up. I really can. And they never were hens. Never. They were always referred to as hens. The hens. And the other thing that we carried, Pisthogues. Pisthogues is an Irish word for superstitions. Now, shortened and would have been said in my growing up, not as Pisthogues, but Pisthogues. They would have talked about the Pisthogues. They say a crowing hen brings bad luck. A whistling maid and a crowing hen would bring the devil from his den. They say a hen should never be sat on a hatching of 13 eggs after sunset, and ashes should be sprinkled on the eggs. They say a pig squeals in the wind because he can see it coming in wild leaping flames. They say it's unlucky to take a cat with a flitting. Now, that comes right back to a story of the O'Neills at Myra Castle. Myra Castle was built in 1601 by Lord Mountjoy when Hugh O'Neill was on the back foot and heading back into Ulster before he led the Earls in the flight of the Earls from Lough Swilly. And Lord Mountjoy built Myra Castle and he garrisoned it with 12 men. But the O'Neills had left a cat behind them because it was unlucky to take a cat with a flitting, and the cat attacked the English soldiers that were garrisoned in Myra Castle, and that's part of the stories that was carried down about the O'Neill's cat. They say if there's a miss in a potato drill or a cornfield, it's the omen of death. Some of these are things that were really talked about like as we were growing up. Red eye itchy, it's tears. Left eye itchy, it's laughter. The point of your nose is a row. The palm of your left hand is money coming. The palm of your right hand is you shake hands. A hole in the fire was somebody leaving when they were poking at the fire. If your knee was itchy, it was awake, and 2 spoons in a cup was a christening. But sure then, they're only old Pisthogues. And the cures, again, carried straight down. And the cures greatly disbelieved by the medical profession and by the church. The cures were not something that was seen to be what people should be doing. They were viewed as Pisthogues, but they were respected and dispensed by family traditions who'd have them for over the years. So the rose, the erysipelas, was using 9 stones and bog water and a prayer. The stay was 9 gooseberry thorns, 10 of them picked and 1 thrown over. And the cure of the stay was made from man to woman and woman to man. So if it was a man who had the stay, it had to be a woman that made the cure. The mumps was the ass's whiskers, driven 3 times into the pig craw. The whooping cough, which will be practised still in South Armagh, was food from a woman married to a man of the same name. So if a woman hadn't changed her name in marrying, they had the cure of the whooping cough. The cure of the dirty mouth, again, would still be practised with us. Was a person who was born after their father had died could have the cure of the dirty mouth. And a cobweb taken would stop a bleeding cut. This one is one that I would have heard people, my mother, talk about. Lifting the spool of the breast was a cure that some of the older women would have done. They're just things that we have taken with us down through, and that, I think, is the value, the absolute value of the oral tradition, because it was the one that people worked with. Like you're talking about even down until the very early 1900s, you still had illiteracy in a big number of people. So their way of communication was the oral tradition, the stories that they carried, and the ability to communicate with each other. For me, I suppose, with younger children now, that's a part that we focus so much on when they're babies. Because babies now, you nearly would think, were born ready to talk. There is so much fuss about babies, and everyone concentrates on this baby. And then, when they become big enough to have gadgets and phones, they become an insular group of people who don't communicate in the same way. So communication and the carrying of stories is massive. I just want to look at this, taking it right back then to the sacredness of the trees, the running water, the mountains, nature. And to think about the fact that we have, in a way, almost come full circle. Because now we are again beginning to realise the danger and the abuse that we have done on the natural world. And that again we are going back to the need to have trees, the need to respect the nature, the need to have an ecosystem, because if we don't, not only will nature go, but people will go. And that in some ways a lot of what we have done as a danger to our own planet is what's causing the severe weather and all of the changes that we're experiencing. So if the Celtic pagan people worship trees, these next couple of slides are an example of how the Christian community took that belief in trees with them, and like the holy wells, they created a new story around them. And that anywhere there was a monastic settlement or there was anything to do with Christianity that was worship, there were trees involved. So just right across Ireland, I've taken a set of them. So the earliest inhabitants considered all natural deities as spirited deities, all natural features as spirited deities in their own life. And the worship of trees is a phenomenon that's in all of the native cultures right across the world. If you look at the stories of the Native Americans, they have great belief in the sacredness of trees. If you look at the Maori people, exactly the same. The Aboriginal people, they all worshipped and respected the land that they stood on and the things that were growing. So this is the ash at Brigid's well. in Kildare in County Westmeath. This is beside the Hill of Uisneach, one of the most important sites in pre-Christian Ireland. There's a celebration stone here marking it as the spiritual centre of Ireland. It's where the first ceremonial fire was lit every year at the opening of the festival of Bealtaine. And this is where St. Brigid is said to have received the veil from St. Patrick at Uisneach. The old ash grows over the well and it's hollow, and candles are burned in the cavity. So this is at the Hill of Uisneach, the most sacred spot in pagan Ireland, and this is it in a Christian identity, the exact same place. This is St. Colman's heritage in County Clare, and St. Colman MacDua was a hermit. He retreated from public life in 600 AD, and he built his oratory here in a dense, remote hazelwood at the foot of Slieve Carn, and the holy well here is in the centre of this grove of hazel trees and the rounded boulders overgrown with moss and lichen. So again, a sacred site in the Christian tradition, and very much a respected site in that area of County Clare. This is the yew, the churchyard yew in Muckross Abbey. I'm sure some of you maybe have been at Musrock Abbey. It was founded in 1448 as a Franciscan friary, and the folklore tradition says that the yew here was planted by the blessed hands of Columkill itself, and left a strict order that believers were not to touch as much as a belief on it. And the belief that's carried there in the oral tradition is that anyone who injured the tree would not be alive on that day 12 months. And a story again in the local tradition tells of somebody who ignored the belief and was found dying, steeped in blood and clutching the branch of the tree that he had broken. This is Mary's Well at Roscar in County Mayo. And the shrine, there's a shrine there to the apparition of the Virgin Mary from around 1680. And the small chapel holds the holy well that's there. Now, the hawthorn tree has grown out of the roof of that church in the 20th century from the vaulted church, and there are seemingly no roots. It's not into the ground, it's growing out of the roof of that church. So it's considered, the tree itself is considered as a miracle tree. Now, the tree, the Celtic people believed that the trees were the most sacred, because the trees, with their roots going into the ground, went into the outer world, and the branches reached up to the heavens. So it was the link between the earth and the heavens. So trees were one of their most particular sacred beings. This is the wishing tree at Dungiven. This is what they call it, where we call ours the healing trees. This is the site of a 12th century Augustan friary just outside Dungiven. And this tree is believed to grant wishes if the rags or the ribbons are offered to its branches. The tree is over a small balance stone, which is a stone that water would have been in and been blessed, and it's reputed to have the cure for warts. Up at Brigid's shrine at Faughart, one of the stones that's there is the cure for warts as well. So Brigid's well and Menina's well in Killeavy, the same as here, both wells from the Celtic pagan tradition. This is Brian Boru's oak. Now, of all of the trees, the oak tree is the most sacred of the trees. Brian Boru was born in 926 near Ratheen, and he was the chieftain and became High King of Ireland in 1202, killed in the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. I don't know if I showed you the Ballymore Fada that day we were out. But the Ballymore Fada is the road that comes through the low part of South Armagh, which is the barony of the Feuds. And Brian Boru's funeral came the Ballymore Fada from the Battle of Clontarf, and he's buried at the Protestant Cathedral in Armagh City. So if you go to the Protestant Cathedral in Armagh, there's a plaque there on the grave of Brian Boru. So this is his oak tree, and the oak tree is seen as the king of the trees. These are beech trees at Tullahogue. Tullahogue is the hilltop fort at Dungannon, which is the inauguration site of the O'Neills. So it was a very special place within the Gaelic chieftain tradition, the birthplace of the O'Neills. The earlier trees were cut down by invaders from Antrim, and the trees that are there now were planted about 200 years ago. But again, the beech trees seen as the sacredness and the holding and the protection of the hill fort. Corliss Fort in South Armagh, which is just outside Crossmaglen, has the same set of beech trees around the top of its fort. And this is a liberty tree. The liberty trees were seen as very much part of the 1798 rebellion story, because that story had carried, and again, there is no history of any part of the world that doesn't have linkages across other parts of the world. So the 1798 rebellion in Ireland was the following on of the independence of America from the English, and of the Bastille and the overthrow of the ascendancy and the hierarchy in France. Was part of the story of looking for independence in 1798. So the pledge of oath of the United Irishmen was done with a bough of a tree, and you answered. That was the secret words that were used. So if somebody produced the bough of the tree, they were inviting you to join the United Irishmen, and the answer to was, where did it grow? It grew in America. Where was it planted? It was planted in France. Where will we put it? In the crown of Great Britain. So that was the oath of the United Irishmen, but it was recognising the rebellion, the independence, first of all, of America and France, and that was then coming to Ireland. So at the 98 rebellion, people showed their support of the 98 rebellion by decorating their houses with green flags and branches and twigs. On the 31st of May, the Liberty Tree was planted by Mary McAleese as part of the bicentennial celebrations for the 1798 rebellion. These are the Wesley beeches, and I've tried to take trees in as wide a way from right across Ireland as I could, and in different sort of, even this is a different tradition, because these are the trees that are associated with John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, when he was on a mission to the industrial estates of Lisburn. And tradition has it that during that visit, Wesley joined a pair of young beeches together so that they would grow up in the same framework as the unity of the Methodist and Anglican churches. And this is the fairy thorn at Loch McCrory. This covers a wedge tomb. You can see the wedge tomb just underneath it. We have no wedge tombs in South Armagh. We have nothing between the dolmens, the passage graves, but wedge tombs were of the Bronze Age time. But if you go to the field beside Ballymascanlon in County Louth, the hotel, there's a very good wedge tomb. So this is guarded by a single thorn, and at our dolmen in Ballykeel, the thorn trees are the guardians of the dolmen, the new Stone Age burial site that's there. The fairies are part of the big story of the hawthorn trees, of the fairy thorn, right across from late Bronze Age and into the ring forts. And any one of these would be treated as the place where the fairies lived. And people wouldn't have cut a fairy thorn. They would have respected that belief. They would have said they didn't believe in the fairies, but they wouldn't have cut the fairy thorn out of the field. They would have left it and they would have worked around it. So again, that's taken us right back to the trees. So the sacred trees, industrialisation and modernisation, the strictness of the Catholic Church as well, because the churches were against some of the old traditions. Once they had moved, once they had assimilated the people into that Christianity, as that went on, that tightened its grip in some ways. The church in Ireland, up through the 1600s, the 1700s, was a free, independent liberal church. It didn't owe its allegiance to Rome. It didn't take its instructions from Rome. It didn't give any of its money back to Rome. It kept it all within the community. And when the dissolution of the monasteries happened, and I remember, reading Tudor history at school and being told about the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII, I thought that only happened in England. I didn't realise, because that wasn't part of the history we learned at school, I didn't realise its implications for Ireland, and that the same dissolution of monasteries had happened here. When the dissolution of the monasteries happened, the Franciscan friars went out and lived among the people. They became very well respected and were part of the community. They were the instructors and the teachers of the community, and very much the Roman strictness of the Roman Church, which came with Oliver Plunkett, which is what he was sent back to do in Ireland, changed a lot of those, hardened the attitudes against old traditions and customs. So the interest in the legends and tales declined, and alongside that, so did the respect for the natural world and its environment. We lost some of that. We lost the working of the land and the respect that gave us to the land. And if you think back to how the whole farming cycle worked, and we talk so much now about improving people's mental well-being, and how instinctively people did that, because the season of spring you planted, the season of summer it grew, the season of autumn you reaped it in and you harvested, and the season of winter, when you had dark days and bad weather and long nights, you moved inside. And people went in and supported each other because there was no work to be done outside. So the natural cycle of the world was something that protected people's mental well-being, because they were together and not isolated in the way that they maybe are now. So I think an increasing number of people are rediscovering the spiritual energy, and those early Christian years were the spiritual Christian church that we talk about now. Of the ancient places of worship, their wells, their sacred trees and their stones. And the devotion is a reflection of that older nature-based spiritual concept that came and had its roots within the Celtic tradition. I think. And I said that yesterday to the young girls. I have massive respect for the young generation that are coming now, because they are identifying the problems that have been done to nature. They are the group of people who will again make change, because they are much, much more aware of those things than we ever were growing up. And they have a sense of things have to work together to work well. I just wanted to show you one last piece, and then we can have a talk before the lunch comes. I started thanking you for mentioning your townland. Some of the work that we've been doing in recent years is very much, and I am passionate about the taking back of the townlands, but also in looking at history in a different way and bringing history back to what it is stories. And being able to tell that story in an oral tradition is important for me, because no matter what period of history you take, you can only put so much into a book. You can't put the bits that are round. You can put the bald fact of, yes, this was a battle and it happened here and this is who was in the battle. But you can't put the surrounding bit of what happened before it, or what happened around it, or what was the life like for the people that were involved in it. And if you don't have that, you lose a certain sense of what that history is about. So you have to look at new ways, I think, of engaging people and bringing them into wanting to be part of a story you're going to tell. Now, this is the townland of Carnally in South Armagh. All of my ancestors on both my mother's side and my father's side would have come from the townland of Carnally. Coming from the Irish language, it means a rocky cairn, and like the advert on the television for Ronseal, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a rocky cairn. There's a lovely story. There was a great old man who was very, very witty. Not educated in the way that people would talk about education, but he could have taken you at just at ground level. And he was at a meeting one night, a farming meeting in Glasdorman Hall, and there was a man there from the ministry, a very nice, officious looking man with a pinstripe suit, Ned said, and 3 pens in his top pocket. And he was starting to lecture them on how to farm. And Ned was disagreeing with everything that he said from the back of the hall. And eventually your man couldn't listen to him any longer, and he said to him, "Mr. McCann, is your land arable?" Because he was there to talk about growing crops. "Is your land arable?" And he said, "Arable? Would you have a tither of wit?" He says, "You'd break your back before you'd break your fast." Because it was all rock, you couldn't dig it. You couldn't grow what you couldn't dig. So it's exactly what it says on the tin. So the song that you're going to hear is a poem that was written by my grandfather, a brother of my grandfather's. He was in England in 1939. Most of the men who were from that South Armagh area and other parts of Ireland were leaving England because of fear of conscription. They were going to be conscripted for the Second World War, so most of them were heading home. Pete couldn't head home because he had married and had a child and he didn't want to leave. And it's his poem to his friend John Reel. John was going home to Carnally. And it is the sadness of the man who couldn't go back to Carnally and his memories of what Carnally was like and what John would see. Now it was a poem that we had in our own family. The girl that's singing it is a Gaeilgeoir. She's an Irish teacher, and she said it. She's a Shannon singer. She said it, put an air to it, and we filmed it around Carnally. So this is a way of selling a townland story. And if you want local history is not going to be in books.
You are heading for Carnally, John, my soul with envy filled. For the youth that's strong within you will be bounding o'er the hills. You will stand on crag and howard, what a sight will then unfold. With your eyes full of the world, just as the ancient poets told. Cuchulainn noble mountain will lie purple in the sun, and lesser mounts will seaward slope in arc to Dalganstown, as if to reach to Clogherhead and to guard the sleeping town. As if and with God's benching that the dapple skies look down. Wander out the winding valley round by Tavies and McShinns, where homes amid the heather led away by winding lanes.
Down by reels and Campbell's bog holes to the savage Craigadil, where the rain gives voice to lilting from the streamlet round the mill. Oh, the hills above Carnally, they come surging through my dreams. I see Carnally's barren rocks, its rushes and its streams. And I pray that those who live there from all sorrow have relief. And I pray that those who die there will all rest in God's great peace.
Sauro buid na nyon yn igleia, hagam mar hen yn sauro ling. Awal go balis gan